Are you ready to manage your work and personal world better to live a fulfilling, productive life? Then you've come to the right place. Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things productivity. Here are your hosts, Ray Sidney-Smith and Augusto Pinaud, with Francis Wade and Art Gelwicks.
Welcome back, everybody, to Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things personal productivity. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And today we welcome to the show James Mulvany. He is the founder of radio.co as well as podcast.co. And we wanted to kind of treat everybody with this interview because we think this is going to be a fun, interesting conversation regarding entrepreneurial productivity. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey here, because it's very interesting to hear that you have this company, radio.co, that helps people create radio stations basically online, and then this podcasting platform. What got you into this and what led you to here?
So when I was sort of 16, 17, I was growing up and sort of finishing school, I wanted to, originally I was looking actually going into radio as on-air talent, you know, as a DJ. And I used to always love music, and I used to love listening to the radio, you know, when I was growing up, and I'd be recording myself on cassette tape and playing it back and all that kind of stuff, like nerdy kid stuff, right? And, you know, when I got to about 18 years old, I decided not to go down that route as a career, but instead I was learning how to build websites and a bit about the tech industry. This was back in like 2005, 2006. I then went off to university and I grew a business, which was, rather than being actually involved in the radio industry, I grew a business supplying services, streaming media services to the industry, because it was obviously an industry that I kind of understood because I'd kind of worked in radio a little bit and done some, you know, work experience. So I sort of understood, you know, the value proposition there. Although when I began, I didn't really know what I was doing technically, so I kind of just figured it out as I went along. And yeah, it just sort of stuck really. I'm still very passionate about radio, and I love audio as a tool to communicate. I think it's fantastic. And obviously over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, podcasting has had this big resurgence, or even maybe the last 2 or 3 years, it's been quite a recent thing. Obviously we launched radio.co in 2015. That platform's now got, I think, over 4,000 different stations using it. So it's been very successful. We had lots of clients coming to us saying, you know, guys, are you going to have a podcasting platform, or are you going to implement some kind of podcasting feature into the service? So we sort of looked at the market and thought, well, do we want to do this as part of radio.co, or is really there an opportunity to launch this as its own standalone platform? So we took the decision to actually create a completely new platform, you know, built it from the ground up. We obviously have a link between the two services, but the two markets are also quite different.
Tell me a little bit about what the podcast.co does as a platform. Obviously, it's a media hosting platform, but it does a little bit more than that. And I'm curious about what got you to think this is going to be the differentiator between a normal podcasting platform and this.
We were doing some, obviously, looking at the market. Interestingly, the first ever podcast I recorded was like back in 2008, and this was just me and like a business friend of mine, and we had this podcast called Kickstart Profits, and that ran for like, I don't know, I think we maybe managed 10 episodes or something, and this was kind of just us messing around with the medium. Fast forward like 5 years, and you know, obviously we kind of saw that there was this opportunity of, you know, podcasting was starting to pick up, and we looked at a lot of the other software out there. Like when me and my friend Steve recorded this podcast, we used to like use WordPress with a plugin, and it was really complicated. And then, you know, the idea of podcasting in like 2008 around then was kind of, you had to download the file onto your iPod and walk around, you know, and obviously nowadays it's completely different. So we wanted to build a solution that was more modern and easy to use. And it seemed that a lot of the podcast platforms out there really had been kind of launched in this period of like 2007 to about 2010. They're kind of quite clunky, old school sort of software. And we wanted to build something that was fresh, modern, and also looked at not just the actual, how do you get your podcast online, but how can I distribute it to, you know, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google, and as many platforms as possible, and really sort of take that technical knowledge away from people, because it's still quite confusing. If someone wants to start a podcast, the idea of understanding what an RSS feed is, it kind of like, to your average person, that's computer talk, isn't it? The plan was to just build a kind of done-for-you platform and just make it as super simple and clean to use and as easy as possible for consumers.
Yeah, by day I actually teach people what RSS feeds are, so I feel that pain on a regular basis.
That pain is shared. I laugh when you mention cassette tapes. I'm sure there is listeners who don't know what they are, but and they and then you went to the basic iPod. But it is interesting because I said a lot. I do business coaching, and a lot of the things I tell the people is one of the big problems people have is they're really good at what they do, but they don't know how to share that content and how to use that content to grow. And what is really interesting for me about the platform is that it allows the people to come with that expertise, but let you do, or the platform do, what it do well, instead of slowing them or stopping them to do that part. And I think there is the need for tools like that, as you said, that where you don't need to necessarily fully understand what an RSS is, but you can now come and bring the content, bring the expertise, on the small businesses. That's what I work the most with. That's one of the biggest obstacles is you have these people who are incredibly good, but are completely stuck where they are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the way podcasting has moved as well is, I think 10 years ago, it was really something reserved for enthusiasts, both on people who are making podcasts and also people who are listening with them, or listening to them rather. So nowadays, people who are producing podcasts aren't always that technically savvy. It's people who just want to share their knowledge. And, why should they have to understand all that stuff? So that was kind of really one of the core values of the platform when we were sort of designing it. We thought it should be simple to use. It should not be intimidating and also, accessible for anyone, really.
We came into contact with you in a fairly unique way, and it was because I'm guessing I was on one of your email lists or something to that effect, and I came across this platform called Matchmaker.fm. I logged in and created a profile, and lo and behold, you popped up in my messages inbox. And so I'm curious about this Matchmaker.fm platform that you've also launched within kind of the podcast.co ecosystem, and what it's all about, and then your kind of program here, the 30 and 30, where you're doing 30 interviews in 30 days. And tell us a little bit about Matchmaker.fm and the 30 and 30 program. How did it come about?
So Matchmaker's it's a real fun project, and we're getting a lot of satisfaction from making connections. And we only launched in middle of February, so it's been live for around 3 months. We've surpassed 3,000 users now. And the premise is like it's Tinder for podcasters, because there's about 60% of podcasts are based on, having guests on or interviewing people or collaborating with others. So, but there didn't seem to be one resource where you could go and, everyone on there was either looking to be interviewed, either industry experts or entrepreneurs or people who've just got interesting stories to tell. And, podcasters who are looking for incredible guests, because this is the thing. If you've got a podcast that's based on interviewing people, sometimes there'll be people who will pull out last minute, or, maybe you've got a week where for whatever reason you haven't got a guest lined up. And sometimes it can be quite a lot of effort to try and consistently deliver results and make sure you've always got someone lined up for the next episode, especially if you're doing, like many people do, a podcast on a weekly basis, or even, bi-weekly or monthly. It can be quite a lot of work sometimes to kind of coordinate and make sure you've always got guests lined up. So we thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if there was just one resource that you could go to and you could get results very quickly? And that's really been the sort of the premise of Matchmaker. It's been, as I say, live for 3 months. The feedback that we've had overall has been fantastic. We launched it currently it's a sort of, we're treating it like a startup within a startup. So it has its sub team working on the development, and the marketing sort of responsibility is shared with the existing team. But the main thing, as I say, that there's been the kind of has blown me away is just the response rate we've had from people, and the amount of people I've had contact me just saying, James, we're getting so many good results from this. We're having really interesting conversations, and we weren't aware of these podcasts, or we weren't aware of these guests before. So as part of the marketing for this platform, I decided to set myself a challenge and get booked on 30 podcasts within 30 days.
Fantastic. And that's what brings you here today.
That's what brought me here today. Yeah. And so far it's going well,
Good. I'm glad to hear that. One of the things that we talked about discussing on the show, because we are Productivity Cast and we talk about all things productivity, I thought we would dive into your entrepreneurial productivity systems and tools. And so let's start with kind of like, on a daily basis, what does a day in the life of James Mulvany's productivity look like?
I'm not right. So I by no means am the most organized or an expert on productivity. I think one of the things that I used to do every single day, and I don't do it as much now. I've got kind of a big team working with me, but especially the days where it was just me on my own, I was starting out, I didn't have a team. Every single day I would have a sheet of paper which I would put in front of me, and I think sometimes I like working on paper. In fact, I've got a notepad right in front of me right here right now, because I just think having post-it notes and paper, sometimes they're always in front of you, you can glance at them, whereas if you kind of got to go into Trello or whatever tool you're using to look at it, it can be harder to find information. So one of the things I used to do is just block the day into like hour sections and just say, right, first hour I'm going to do this, second hour I'm going to do this, and I'd make sure I'd just cross things off as I was going. That was really effective when I just used to be on my own, and I didn't have a team to manage or anything like that. Nowadays, we obviously work on sprints. So in terms of the development team, they work in 2-week sprints according to sort of agile methodology, and that they're sort of super organized about that. And interestingly, we've just in marketing and sales, we've started working in sprints as well now too, 2-week intervals, just to try and get some more organization going. So yeah, those are kind of like my top tips. So I think, to be honest with you, the bigger you grow, there's about 30 number staff working across both brands now. I think you need to focus more on communication. You need to focus more on organization. It was I think for me, like the sweet spot of when, it was kind of like, it was a few of us, and we were sort of in the early days of radio.co, maybe there was like 8 or 9 of us. That was kind of super cool, because of it, everyone could just kind of throw ideas together. Whereas now I think you've got to be a bit more structured about everything.
Yeah, as a company grows, there's always going to be a culture that develops, and that culture needs to be, understood by everybody, and that always means more investment in that infrastructure. Habits are to individuals as culture is to an organization. Things are slow moving when it comes to organizations, and that also means that if you don't have the right structure up front, then that becomes more difficult on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky because I have a really good CTO and a really good COO. And they're both super organized. So I think they kind of, I'm the ideas guy. I come up with the strategy, and sometimes I can go a million miles an hour. And what I've learned over the last few years, especially as we've grown the team, is sometimes I have to slow down and keep my mouth shut, because actually sometimes you need to let people focus on one thing and finish doing that before you can start saying, well, how about let's doing this and let's do that. So I think sort of having those structures and those processes in place has been really, really important and crucial to us as a business.
And I think you hit an important point. You said I had an incredible CTO and COO that are super organized. And I don't want to put words on your mouth, but you said I'm the least organized of these 3, at least.
Definitely.
And at least that was what I understood. And it is really important, as this entrepreneurship goes and these businesses are growing, who are going to be these teams and which skills are going to have. And sometimes we see people who try to bring the people with the similar skills. Oh, well, I'm really good at this. Let me bring people like this, instead of people like what you are describing that come and complement those skills that you have. So you show, I mean, for us, you show us on the camera a little notepad, but let me dig a little bit more into that, because, as when we do the regular show, we have PCs, we have Macs, we have iPads, we have Chromebooks. So we have basically every device comes to the show when the regular shows happen. So what is in front of you? It's a Mac, it's a PC, doesn't matter. You don't care, you work on a phone. So what is your technology tool that continue helping pushing day to day? And what is that application? I know you mentioned Trello slightly there. Is Trello still there on the list, or what are the applications? And the reason is people like to know, what are the day-to-day, but also what helps James think, 3 step forward.
I'll tell you everything we use. So I'm based on Mac. I switched to Mac about 10 years ago, and I've been a big fan ever since. Same with phone. I like Apple iPhone. Right. In terms of software, yeah, we use Trello quite heavily. For managing sort of the agile process, we use Jira in terms of our development, and we've started using that, as I say, in marketing as well. I still also like writing notes, so I have a lot of notes on just like the Apple Notes application as well. Obviously sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, paper has a benefit for just kind of doing day-to-day stuff. The problem with this thing is if you want to go and find something that you wrote 2 months ago, it can be quite difficult, right? So sometimes I think, having notes on the computer can also be really useful as well.
I will just poke in there and just say that you can always take a photograph of that, and then that way you can search it, later in different applications, whether that be any number of tools that do that.
Evernote is I started using Evernote a few years ago, and I just never quite got into it, but supposedly it's got some really powerful features.
You didn't know me. That's why. Little thing you probably don't know is that I'm an Evernote certified consultant, and also I'm the Evernote regional leader for North America, and you're not in North America, so you wouldn't have known. But Evernote does have that capability, which does make it quite useful. And most recently, Google Lens got the capability of lifting text out of the documents that you scan. So you could just, open up the application, snap a picture of it, and it actually lifts the handwritten text and turns it into typed text. So you can then just throw it into Apple Notes. So
I think that's one of those things where you have to get into the habit of doing it. I'm not in the habit of doing that. So for day-to-day notes, I'll put them down on paper. Then if there's stuff that I know I need to reuse, I'm quite good at doing lists on Apple Notes. And again, Apple Notes has got so much better than it was, say, 5 years ago. It used to be really basic. There's a lot more functionality, and you can be more organized, have folders and everything now. Whereas I think back then it was just literally one list, wasn't it, of notes? And I don't think you could have checklists or anything. So yeah, I think there's lots of software out there. It's just about finding the right thing that works for your workflow, really.
Yeah, when years ago, when I begin moving from that similar issue, from having the notes and the notepads and the pieces of index cards. I love index cards, and we're having exactly that issue. The pile of index cards at the end of the week, and who's going to read into this? Okay, but some of the information was critical. I really could not afford to lose it. So what I started doing was, I set a couple of times on my calendar in the middle of the day and the end of the day to take the pictures and scan. And initially they went to Evernote. After that, removed them from there. But it was when the problem right now is, if I told you go and scan it, you're going to look all the 6 days back and say, I quit, I'm out. When you start putting that, then now it's a 10 to 15 minute task that then you will get done, much easy. And the power of having the access to those notes are incredible. I live on the iPad, and there is an application called Good Notes where I take, and now the Good Notes allow me to handwrite everything, and then I can select it and convert it in text. Is the conversion perfect? No, because my handwriting is so awful, but it's not the software capability, it's the handwriting here. But it is probably 85% accurate, that if I'm looking at that note and convert it, I can quickly fix the little things. And now I have a text that I can export to Notes or to anywhere. I love what Apple has done with Notes, especially because, as you said, I can have them on the iPad and they will synchronize automatically, and I don't need to think about where that note is. And the search function on the app works really, really well.
I think that's the thing. I think search as well has got so much better over the last, say, 5 years. It really, again, Gmail, I just think it's fantastic. I can generally find any email. If I want to find an email and I remember the subject or remember some part of it, I can always find it.
Yeah, Augusto introduced me. Well, he didn't introduce me, but he convinced me to use GoodNotes. And I'm a handwriting fanatic, and so I'm actually taking notes in our conversation today on an Everlast Rocket book notebook, and love them. I absolutely love the notebooks, and they're great. But I do go back and forth between writing on the iPad with the Apple Pencil, and Augusto convinced me to go with GoodNotes over Notability. And then he showed me last week, I suppose it was, the ability to circle text and lift the text from the image. And I'm sorry, Augusto, but my text comes out perfectly every time.
I begin saying it's not the software, it's the handwriting. Okay, I was in college and many years ago, and I did the test, and I did the test, and when the teacher came back, he asked, "Who is this?" And I raised my hand, kind of in shame, and he said, "Next test, you do it in my office on my laptop." Poor guy could not read my handwriting text.
When we talk about your CTO and COO, I'm curious, do you know what makes them, if you're the visionary crazy maker in that side, what do you feel like makes them organized, and what do they do in some of their work to help keep you organized and moving forward?
That's a very good question. I think you sort of touched on it before. Having a good team around you that complements you is great. And obviously, we've all got our strengths and weaknesses. John, who's CTO, he's been with me for a long time now. We've worked together since about 2011, and he was always really good at kind of the granularity and in terms of what he does in managing the development team. Making sure that there are certain standards that are adhered to when code is written. So when you're working on a big platform like radio.co, podcast.co, there's a lot of code base there, and you've got to be organized to and structure that in a certain way so that when someone new comes onto the team, they can easily sort of start understanding how sections of the product work. And certainly in the past, when we've built products, especially in the early days, we had that problem where you might have one developer working on a solution, in a silo, and that can be a very, very dangerous position to be in as a tech company. Because if that person decides that they want to move on to a different company, you can hire someone to replace them, but then the rest of the team don't always have a good understanding of how that function was built, for example. So we've been as a business being a lot more proactive over the last, I'd say, 2 years of making sure that, rather than having one developer working on one thing and one developer working on another thing, they're always kind of sharing the tasks and responsibility. And Aaron, who's our COO, he's always been very organized. Again, he's probably one of the best people within the organization at putting processes in place, and making sure that different departments are communicating. And again, it's interesting because over the last couple of months, as I said, we're normally office based, and I think we've been having to focus more on communication. There has been a few hiccups here and there where different departments aren't necessarily being the best at communicating together. So there's always room to improve. One of the other things we've recently implemented, again, this was our COO who sort of put this in place, is doing a town hall meeting, which is basically when you send out an anonymous survey to every single member of the company. They can complete it. They can say what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying, good things, bad things. And then obviously the main things you need to look at, okay, how can we solve any of these negative points? And certainly what's been very interesting about this process is we're seeing, people who have said similar things. So if you get sort of three people within a department saying, yeah, this isn't great, this isn't great, this isn't great, that you've got some kind of issue there. So it allows you to sort of single down and focus in on how to solve those problems. And then the idea is you have this meeting, a town hall, which coincidentally is actually today we're doing this meeting, but obviously we've got to do it remotely like this, where you basically say, okay, look, we've identified these common issues, and here's how we're going to try and resolve them, and here's how we think that we can solve them out. So that has been for a fantastic example of an exercise that's kind of we ultimately want everyone to be productive as they can be. Also, it's very, very important to me, and again, I think this is one of my strengths, is just building a really good, solid culture within the company. But then obviously if things start to slip, and as you grow, it's quite easy to take your eye off the ball in terms of the culture side of things, because you're not speaking to everyone and fully aware of what everyone's doing all the time. So it's a good way to kind of just get everyone unified and get everyone on the same page, basically.
I think it's really important to have a culture that respects everybody's individual views, even if they're not used. I always tell people, I want to hear everything, even if I say no to all of them. And it's just good to understand that I'm going to hear people out. And I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up the conversation, in terms of what do you feel like is the number one, if you could have a number one, what's the kind of the best thing that you feel like has caused the success of both radio.co and podcast.co in terms of the organizational qualities of the business and maybe the fit? Because I'm just curious, what do you feel like was the success of the organizations?
Gee, that's a hard question to answer, isn't it? Just to narrow down one thing. I think I go back to what I said before. I think culture has been really, really important. We've got a very, very good track record for retaining staff, which traditionally isn't always the case in the technology sector, and also just perseverance. I think you've just got to sometimes keep at things. This is one of my values as an entrepreneur. Once you've decided to go down a certain road, you've got to keep going down that road, even if things don't always go your way. Just try and keep focused. And stay down that path, because again, this is the thing, especially in the early days, I was always guilty of coming up with ideas every single week, and then suddenly you'd end up just sort of focusing on too many things at once. So I think sticking at one thing can be really valuable.
So focus and culture.
Oh, focus and culture. There we go. Yeah.
Any final thoughts that you have that you wanted to share before we closed out?
Well, I mean, just if obviously I'm at the moment, I'm trying to get as many folks on board as matchmakers. So if anyone listening has got an interesting story to tell, or they think that they can add value to people's podcasts, please feel free to sign up. It's totally free to join.
Thanks, James, for joining us here on Productivity Cast.
Thanks, Ray, and Augusto. Great to speak to you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was James Mulvany, CEO and founder of podcast.co and radio.co. If you have a question or a comment for James, or anything we've discussed during this cast, please visit our episode page on productivitycast.net. They're on the podcast website at the bottom of the page. You can leave a comment or a question, and we're happy to respond and answer any questions that you might have there. By the way, to get to any Productivity Cast episode quickly, simply add the 3-digit episode number to the end of productivitycast.net /. So episode 1 would be productivitycast.net /001. Episode 2 would be productivitycast.net /002, and so on. If you have a topic about personal productivity you'd like us to discuss on a future cast, please visit productivitycast.net /contact. You can leave a voice recorded message, or you can type us a message, and we'll be happy to look to see if we can feature you in a future episode. I want to express my thanks to Augusto Pinaud, Francis Wade, and Art Gelwicks for joining me here on Productivity Cast each and every week. You can learn more about them and their work by visiting productivitycast.net also. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, and on behalf of all of us here at Productivity Cast, here's to your productive life. Take care, everybody.
That's it for this Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things productivity, with your hosts, Ray Sidney-Smith and Augusto Pinaud, with Francis Wade and Art Gelwicks.